already so prevalent in today's society, may be thwarted. It gives me great pleasure, therefore, to present to you today the founder of the League, Miss Sylvia Stankhurst, singing for us a song which offers sage advice to the worried citizen. Sylvia's mother, the celebrated Emmeline Stankhurst, will accompany on the pianoforte.
All right, folks, it's time for Side Out with David Duncan and Mecky. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Take it away, guys.
Welcome to Shiny Side Out with
Dave.
Hello.
Hello. With Dave.
We're coming live to you from the Sydney Studios in Australia. The station has a chat room, and we're in it right now at freedomslips.com, and you can listen from there too. Check our website, ShinySideOut.net, for more information. Also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. There are heaps of ways to listen to us. If you're live in Kentucky, it's FMWZZR 101.3, or via an app. Revolution Radio, TalkStream Live, TuneIn.com, RadioTuner, Speaker.com, iHeart, Live 365, and our very own app, Shiny Side Out. At home, if you have a Grace tabletop digital radio, or driving around on a GM motor vehicle with the receiver-enabled radio. All of those are revolutions in radio. If you want a CD of our last year's shows, check the station's website for details. You can purchase them now. The number to call in if you're in the United States of America is 347-688-2902. Or, which is easier, via Skype, you simply add Freedom Screen. Freedom Screen, one word. Solaris had an awesome show. Yet again, thank you, Solaris. Dave, are you with me?
I am, and I was muted.
Right, that's what happens.
126 shows, and I still don't forget to unmute.
Oh, that's awesome. I switched my video off just in case there was some kind of interference. I'm going to switch it back on.
Awesome.
So you didn't hear Dave's voice before. It is, of course, Shining Side Out with Dave and Mackie. And, he's right. It is show number
126.
620 and 100. That's incredible. And again, thank you, Solaris, for being there and being there before us. Great show.
Who was on her show? Hosel, wasn't it? What's her name? Suzanne.
I think so. I think that's right.
Yeah.
I don't want to get it wrong because I only listened to the last bit of it. Had unfortunately some stuff to do. Did you manage to catch it all?
Yeah, I did. I've been
beautiful
setting all the stuff up here. You don't see it, all the stuff that happens in the background, but setting it all up today, and it was pretty good show. And you know what? She's just another one of those people who are awake, Mickey.
Yes, right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really a very important theme here as well. To be awake, to be among the few that are awake. It's painful. It's not easy to be awake, but most of the rest of us slumber.
Oh, it looks like I'm getting some massive pings from someone. I just got an alert. They don't like us, Mickey. Not today. That's okay. Everyone, it seems like Mickey's having a bit of trouble with his bandwidth, or it's my end. I think we'll only find out when we post the show later on. Mickey's still talking. So, There we go. We'll see what we can do with Meki. All right. So hang on. I'm just gonna junk Meki, and then I'm gonna call him back, and hopefully that'll work just fine. Oh, technical difficulties. In the meantime, please enjoy a beautiful slide where you can fold your own tinfoil hat if you don't have one. I don't want this to be quite as comical as it may seem. There are a lot of people that discuss with me that the satellites can't hear you when you're wearing one. Although we did a show where it suggested that wearing one was actually indeed worse for you because it focused all of the energy at the wrong part of the brain, and let's just consider that as being the wrong part of the brain that you don't want to be cooked by using a mobile phone. So please attend to your own requirements if necessary for that. Hello, Meki, you're back online with us.
Well, how much of that did you get? What happened, dude?
0. And and when you hear the playback, you'll hear, and that's all we got.
Wow.
So please, once again, I didn't tell anyone anything about my week yet, but how was your week?
Okay, my week was good.
Yep.
Look, I had a great week, and now apparently we're getting some information from the chat here from Keith AZ, Arizona, I imagine. Thank you, Keith. You seem to be dropping out. I'm okay.
Yeah, that's a bit unlikely because I'm hosting a call.
All right, that's what I'm. But hey, it's in the chat, so I don't know, dude. You tell me anyway.
Hi, Keith. What are you doing? I was actually speaking to Keith a bit earlier on today.
Right. Okay.
So
cool. Look, my week has been okay. But how has your week been, sir?
I went to Michael Tellinger.
Yes, you did.
You
did.
And I communicated with you, Meki, a little bit just before the show. Poor Meki. Well, you can't be everywhere at once.
Meki works a lot. Meki's working like a crazy fool, and he is. That's the thing. I was looking forward to Tellinger, but I look forward to many things.
Yeah.
It's not. Sometimes it's just not meant to be. So, Dave, how was it though? Was it good?
It was truly awesome. He's tremendous. He fills the stage. He has a lot of tremendous information, and I went down there with members of the Tugra UFO group who were all switched on, and we all went down there and enjoyed ourselves. It was very good. I got home at I think 1 o'clock in the morning. Thanks, Keith. Now, what was the message? I suppose this is his Ubuntu tour, and if you're lucky enough to be in a town near him, go check it out. It's really good. If you're going to the Nexus conference, also, it would do yourself a favor. I sound like someone from the 70s on the TV. You know who you are. It was really good. He spoke at length about the stone circles. He spoke at length about, which surprised some of the people in the audience, by the way, because they weren't aware of it, and that was that the stone circles themselves are made of a material that rings like a bell. It's tremendous. What he's bringing forward there, the information. Also, he ties that with and anyone who knows what I'm saying, Enki, their creator, and the Sumerians and the Anunnaki and the sons of Enki. He brings all that together and combines that with the gold mines and all of the resources there. And look, it really is a tremendous culmination of, and he's strung it all together beautifully. And then he provides the Ubuntu thing. He created the Ubuntu party. We're going to have him on the show anyway, I promise you. And the Ubuntu party is, he promised the people that he was going to get rid of the Reserve Bank in Zimbabwe.
Oh no. Not good. That's not good.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's still alive.
That's not good.
right?
Well, the thing is, he has to win first, yeah?
Yeah, of course.
So if he wins and
Yeah.
he sticks with his policies, I think that's not going to happen. So
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a license to assassination.
Yes, sir.
I'm not supporting it, but clearly the last two people that mentioned it aren't with us anymore. And since we spoke about it, he signed my book. I bought a book, and he signed it for me, and we had a quick chat. And he honestly he's a lovely guy. He means what he says. Nothing in it seemed like it's all on track. It's all on par. It's everything he's talking about. It all lines up, and he's got a great package. So I like what he has to say, and let me say that all the people that went with me, they weren't all as enlightened as I was before we went, but certainly they walked away from it with new vision. So well done, Michael. Yeah,
that is awesome. I mean, tying it back into the I guess the Anunnaki and the ancient cuneiform tablets and so forth. And make no mistake, we've brought this to you guys before, so you are aware. In fact, we've brought you the direct translations. We didn't go to a book. We went to the university sites that hold the translations and read the translations to you from there.
That's right.
Unadulterated, unfiltered. So this is scholarly accepted work, and a lot of it is in fact reported accurately in the book that deal with this subject matter, including the creation of the first people.
Mm-hmm.
Ostensibly to mine gold for the gods and so forth. They've also found gold mines in South Africa, very ancient gold mines, and this is just continuing the threat. Michael Tellinger is continuing the threat. He's found, I think it's 20 million stone circles.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a staggering number.
It is a staggering number. At the conference, he still maintains more than 10 million plus.
Yeah.
I think he's refined that down from 20 million, but at least it's great. 10 million. Still 10 million is a huge number. One of the things he said was truly surprising. He said he ran into some fellows, and they were mine rescue guys. And he says that he was chatting to them in a bar over a beer, and they were having some laughs, and this guy doesn't know who he is at this point.
Right.
Still,
right?
And he confesses to them being a mining rescue team, and during one of their rescue training missions, they found a sinkhole had opened up in a local community. So they said, well, that'd be a great place to do a mine rescue. So
training, you mean? Yep.
Yeah, training. Yeah, it's only training. And so they went down into this hole. They set up all their gear. They went down the hole, and down in the hole, lo and behold, they found a mine shaft. Well, they found a shaft that you could walk in that was 18, 20 foot tall, and it was paved on the floor and on the walls with stone. And they followed, which is not what you do when you're mining.
No.
Yep. And they walked along, and they found that it opened to a large room, and in that room was a statue of, and please don't get me wrong, because I don't remember the exact name that he used, of the South American god, but like Quetzalcoatl or something.
Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah, Quetzalcoatl. There you go.
Kukulkan. It's the winged serpent. It's the white bearded god that brought a lot of learning to the South Americas, and then disappeared into the East, and then said, "I'll come back." And unfortunately, the Spanish came back the day he said he was coming back, and continued to
they mistook him. Yeah, the red hair.
The population. Yeah. Wow.
So,
really?
So there was a statue in there underground. And when they went to the whoever it is society, they said, we found something, you might be interested in it. And the next conversation they had with them was, what? So, well, how did you like that thing we showed you? What thing? There wasn't a thing? The tunnel. Yeah, the tunnel. Oh, no, we filled the hole in. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's all good.
What?
Yep.
Wow.
It disappeared. It's gone now. So
that's-
apparently he mentions that this happens all the time. In fact, there's so many tunnels under there, it's the labyrinth.
Dang.
Under Zimbabwe, yeah. So,
Well,
who knows?
this is interesting. Zimbabwe used to be called Rhodesia.
Yep.
You know this, right?
Yeah.
And you know that Cecil Rhodes, it was named after him, right? So Cecil Rhodes is also the founder of the Rhodes Scholarships,
Oh.
and he's also the convener, if you will, of the Colonial Roundtable, or the Roundtable of the Great British Empire. So. So I wonder, since this particular patch of land was named after him, if there was not some connection. Now that you mention this.
Well, it's funny when he was when he was describing the connection with the Anunnaki and the gods and the birthplace and the Adam's calendar, the whole it all meshes together, and I'd be surprised if you could find any fault with anything he was talking about. The only thing that I had to fill in I think he gets excited, when he's talking about stuff, and he didn't say Adamu.
Right.
He didn't mention first man, the word, because for me that was the clincher that dragged me kicking and screaming into the world of the Anunnaki and the Sumerian text being real. That's what pulled me in. Nothing else pulled me in. Otherwise, it's just some hokey old language, who cares, right? About something that it doesn't matter, doesn't interest me. But as soon as that connected together, bingo, I'm on board, and nothing else. Oh, he talks about the age of the gods, them all being 30,000+ years old, or 28,000 years old and greater, and then the Great Flood came, and he talks about them being relocated to another planet. It's just all in the Sumerian text.
That's fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
and again,
fascinating.
it should not be anything new to our listeners
No.
if you've been with us for the last 2 years. but it is nice to have Michael on the ground, and this is really the key thing here, guys. Right? He's on the ground in Africa, physically. I guess exploring,
there.
researching.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? He's there, exploring those sites for us. Well, not for me and Dave, for all of us.
For all of us. Yeah.
So this is something that Dave and I want to get into a bit more, and the recent changes in my work may very well allow that. So Dave and I have plans to go to certain places in Australia initially, unless we get some kind of funding from somewhere. Hint, hint.
Yeah, we're looking for a wealthy benefactor.
Wealthy. Doesn't matter if he's a benefactor as long as he's wealthy. He can be.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you who was in the audience too. By the way.
Okay.
A couple of UFO hypnotherapists.
Okay.
They don't hypnotize UFOs, but abductees. I should watch my grammar. Also, the Strongs. Evan and his dad were there.
Oh, they were there, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I said hello. They looked at me like I was foreign.
Really?
Yeah, completely. What else? There was a whole bunch. There's a whole bunch. You'd know. Like, it was funny. It was like the who's who of people in the industry. Yeah.
In the industry, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, in the genre, I should say. So,
I'm with you.
But look, outside of the Tellinger experience, which I'm still glowing from, I think it was great. What's the news, Becky? What do you got?
Look, we've got a few different things here. Today's show is actually very topical for us, and we found that last week's show was had a lot of resonance, so we want to maintain that as much as we can. But essentially, we're going to look at diseases. We're going to look at weaponized diseases, biological weapons. We're looking at, in fact, what Kissinger said in the 60s, 1969. I'm going to start you guys off with that in a second. But right now, there are news stories in the papers, online, on TV, which worry me greatly. They worry Dave greatly, and there are three, and in fact, there's a fourth one that Dave will link for us here as well. So just very briefly, there's we're going to go into some detail here. There's a town that was sealed off in China after a man has died from the plague, and 151 people were placed in quarantine. There's an Ebola outbreak in Guinea. Okay, once again. Okay, and we also have Papua New Guinea, which is of specific interest to Australia, of course, which is teetering on the brink of a runaway tuberculosis epidemic. That's not me. That's actually the newspaper headline.
And this is the untreatable.
Yeah, that's the MDR. That's the multi-drug resistant
Yep.
tuberculosis. Essentially, it means is, once you get it, that's pretty much it. Game over. And unfortunately, and we're going to come into this in some detail in a second, but unfortunately for Australia, the cases that are being treated right now in Papua New Guinea are literally walking distance away from the Australian mainland. So on a low tide, you could theoretically walk across to Australia.
Or of course you could get in a boat and make it quicker, or you could fly.
That's
you know.
exactly. Yeah, but it's very close, and this is probably the worst one, because the reason for this multi-drug resistant TB is the fact that people have been receiving improper or incomplete health care, right? So they didn't complete their antibiotics courses. They got the prescriptions, which of course means the bug that causes this survives and becomes resistant because you did not complete your treatment. So this is in Moldova and China. I mean, we've got some stats here for you as well. So that's the topical stuff, and I want you to think about also what happened last week with the plane that went down and who was on that plane. Right now, who was on that plane was the elite, at least from Holland or the Netherlands. Of AIDS researchers and also tuberculosis researchers, coming up with cures and tracking the history of the disease. So that's all now. It's happening now. And I want to quickly remind you as well of the death of the microbiologists. This is only we had the show going. So this was within the last 2 years. This happened. Right? I think it was 12 or 13 microbiologists which mysteriously passed.
Yep.
I think it's about the correct number. And Dave, I do want to share a quote though from Kissinger. Excuse me. In July of 1969, the American president, or then President Nixon, held a historic address before Congress. In his first speech on the issue of population, he said this: "One of the most serious challenges to human destiny in the last third of the century, which is last century, will be the growth of the population." Okay, that was the biggest challenge. And what happened is that Kissinger rose to the occasion, okay, and published a paper on that. And in that he advocated the population reduction to 500 million globally. Okay.
That's alternate 3, isn't it?
Yes, it is, sir. Now this is okay under the guidance of Kissinger, and this is the Memorandum 200. You might have heard of it. The National Security Council, this is in the States, submitted the so-called National Security Study Memorandum 200 to the U.S. President in 1974. It was classified until 1989. And this is the heading of the document: the implications of worldwide population growth for U.S. security and overseas interests. In it, Kissinger and his like-minded associates call for a massive reduction of the population in less developed countries. And those that are explicitly mentioned are India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria, Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil, the Philippines, Thailand, Egypt, Turkey, Ethiopia, and Colombia. Now, this plan was to be achieved by means of food scarcity, sterilization programs, and war. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, all of these are pretty good measures of population reduction, but by far the cheapest bang for your buck is through disease. Okay, by far. If you have been following popular culture, especially in the UK, there was a great TV show which is called Utopia. Last year, 6-parter. UK TV shows usually are quite short running. You know this, Dave, right? Like five, 6 installments, maybe 3, but they're packed full of entertainment normally. Utopia, though, was quite different. Utopia, the basic premise, I don't want to wreck it for you, is that there is in fact an agent out there hidden in the blood of the protagonist, the heroine of this particular drama, which is designed to sterilize or cause infertility in the human population. The second series has now been released, and I'm really curious to watch it. The first 3 episodes are available for you to view on the net as well, I think. Now, I mention this because, once again, I think we have art reflecting or imitating life. Okay, Dave. So these are serious things. It is really very dangerous to dismiss Kissinger and his depopulation agenda. Now, in 1978, Kissinger stated this in another memorandum: depopulation should be the highest priority of the U.S. foreign policy towards the third world, because the U.S. economy will require large and increasing amounts of minerals from abroad, especially from less developed countries. Now, this is interesting. The then CIA director, George Bush, was one of those tasked with implementing the plan. Okay? This is the elite that's in charge now, guys. This is happening. This is nothing. This is not something that is a theory anymore. And this is why this worries me. This is why it worries Dave. So we want to quickly share with you the articles of these particular outbreaks of the plague, for Christ's sake. I'm sorry, I don't want to blaspheme, but really, the plague?
The plague, Mickey. And you know what? The plague is such a dangerous, and I'm going to say weapon, that it's... so tell me about this lockdown. Tell me more about how many is affected. You said 150 people were affected.
So
yeah?
So 151 people were actually placed in quarantine, right? So these were people that had direct contact with the man who actually died of this plague. And this is the one thing that worries me is this. Now, most articles talk about it being the bubonic plague, okay? But I also found a CNN article which says it's actually the pneumonic plague.
Yeah, pneumonic.
So pneumonic meaning, of course, it can be airborne, which is a worry. But so essentially, there are 30,000 people living in Yumen, which is the city in the northwestern province of Gansu, and they're not being allowed to leave. So it's quarantined. There are police roadblocks and so forth. So it has been locked down. Okay. And now apparently the city has enough supplies to last for about a month. Okay, and most of the local residents and also those that have been quarantined are in a stable condition. Now this is a very recent article that came, I think, through at the beginning of this week, and it's harking back to, of course, to the Black Death. The epidemic that killed 3/4 of Europe in the 14th century. Three-quarters, tens of millions of people.
The quantity of those, but tens of millions, yeah.
Yep, that is correct. There was a more recent pandemic, the modern plague, and it began in China in 1860, and it reached Hong Kong by 1894. And that you can actually look at that on the CDC website. And that pandemic caused 10 million deaths. 10 million deaths, right, back then. And modern antibiotics are effective in treating the plague, the CDC says. But without proper treatment, of course, it leads to serious illness and death. And Dave, I believe you've got a link there as well to the United States. Is that right?
Yeah, completely. Now, this is the biggest surprise.
The human plague infections that occurred in the West.
Yeah, that's right. So, in Colorado, the pneumonic plague case rises to 4. And I'll just paste this in because I think it's really important that we paste these stories into the chat room. Okay, so that comes from Guardian LV. Right, so 2 weeks after a Colorado resident tested positive for pneumonic plague, that's the coughing airborne one, the number has now risen to 4 confirmed cases. All 4 individuals are believed to have contracted the disease after contact with the same dog that had died from the disease. The canine potentially came into contact with a prairie dog, rabbit, or other rodent infested with a plague-carrying flea during a walk in, Adams County near Denver. We're talking Denver, Colorado, right? Where's the largest underground US base? Denver, Colorado.
Yep.
So imagine wiping out the population of Denver first, so no one's going to come near you and you're safe, right? The initial human infected, the initial human infected was the dog's owner. The dog and his owner were on a walk in an open field, and do you know what? This is scary. All right. So this is the first I've ever heard that the plague is in the US currently happy, in prairie dogs, rabbits, or other rodents.
Yes, sir.
Like it's happily propagating there, and it's what? When did it get there?
Yeah, look, this is the thing, and I would have thought that. I mean, I know it's in the third world still. In India, there's the occasional plague. There was a pneumonic plague outbreak some years ago, but it's just something you don't associate with the developed world. With the first world countries like the United States.
That's right.
And the plague epidemic in China would be catastrophic, of course, because there's just, there's just so many people there, and human contact is almost impossible to avoid. I know it's a big country, but you got over 1 billion people, and similarly, India would be another hot pot for this kind of disease. It's just shocking to see that we still have the plague. Now, it is contained for now, but because the entire town was quarantined, you can see how seriously the Chinese take this. Okay, and once again, and this is drawing a longer bow, a little wider net here. All disease-related news of the last 10 or 15 years, even 20 years, we must take into the consideration of the global population or global depopulation agenda, according to Kissinger and his cronies. It is a real thing. It is something they do want to do, and it's not necessarily in the interest of the United States, but it certainly is in the interests of the elite to have this, I guess, seen through. This is the shocking thing. But Dave, do you want to bring something in about MH17, sir?
Pardon me for coughing, guys. I couldn't stop that one. Yeah, you know how we've got MH370.
Yep.
We've got MH17. And now we've got, just in the last week, we have Air Algeria flight 5017. 17. Another 7. All gone. All dead. And there was also one that spewed off the end of a runway, unable to stop. Yeah?
Yeah.
So we've got 3 particularly nasty crashes, although this wasn't a 777, this was an MD-83 aircraft. They say it was bad weather. They say that the pilot radioed in that there was a sandstorm in front of them and they were going to divert around it. Okay, so you've got a pilot in control of a plane who decides to divert around something, but then is taken down by something else. That's very strange.
It is, sir. I mean, look...
you can see sandstorms.
The thing is this, there's a saying, and you must have heard it before. One time, or when something happens one time, that's a coincidence.
Yep.
Twice is happenstance, and 3 times is enemy action. So we had 3 crashes. More or less. Well, we don't know what happened to MH370.
Yep.
But 3 planes have disappeared or have been destroyed with, for all intents and purposes, with all people on board lost. Because that's one thing that's for sure with the first plane that's disappeared. Those guys are no longer with us, I think. Be that as it may, though, so that's 3. And in such short notice, in such short time, it's unusual. Especially because you'd think that people would be a lot more careful, the pilots and so forth. Normally when something like this happens, people take heart because it is unlikely to happen soon again, because security precautions are brought up, double checks on the engineering, double checks on the planes, whatever it might be. But I have to ask the question, who was on that plane? I understand it was largely French citizens that were on that plane in Africa. Don't know who, though. Don't know who was on the plane.
No. There was
usually
118 French nationals.
Yeah, so if you want to assassinate someone and you don't want to make a statement like they did with Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy and so forth, the best way to disguise it is to have a larger tragedy to cover it up. So the extra human cost is almost incidental. It's a collateral damage. It doesn't matter. So it might have been assassination of one person, of several people, or group of people, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is that when these things happen, I'm always very suspicious, and that's just me. It's my mind, right? and these accidents do happen. Don't get me wrong, but for the most part, I don't believe in accidents. Okay, I really don't, and especially when it smells fishy, it doesn't smell right. And these 3 particular incidences don't smell right. There are other plane crashes that you go, well, fair enough, that was a crash, I get that, or it happened on takeoff, on landing, you can see what goes wrong.
Yeah.
If it's in flight, I don't know. And like we discussed last time, there are quite a few plane crashes and incidents and accidents don't smell right, that have this aura of I guess wrongdoing or malfeasance, because these people don't mind to kill a whole bunch of people to cover something up, right? That's really the key thing. And again, this mindset is also the mindset which drives the depopulation agenda.
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, I know. I get it, 100%.
Can you think about a targeted weapon from space bringing down the plane rather than it being a ground-based thing?
We know about Tesla weapons, and this is the thing. Again, the movies are way ahead of us here, and I know I keep bringing this up, but guess what? Hollywood receives a lot of leaks. A lot of the stuff. Think of the Space Odyssey, the movie, right?
Yeah.
And then compare that to the actual moon landing shots, right? In 1969, because that's when it was made. It was made in the late 60s. Make no mistake. Yeah. In fact, the movie Space Odyssey was made before we allegedly landed on the moon.
That's
so,
right.
So
it was also claimed that the same guy filmed both.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly right. And that Kubrick knew something about it. Anyway.
Yeah.
So there are quite potentially weapons that Tesla didn't really develop any weapons. He developed technology. How we use it is entirely up to us. Yeah. But there are weapons that can induce earthquakes. And it's all about frequency. So for Tesla it was all about frequency. He said, with given the right frequency, I can shake the world apart. And he was a genius. I mean, trust me. If you don't know anything about him, look him up. It's astonishing stuff. And yes, you can have, theoretically, you could have a weapon like that cause an earthquake midair. So all you need is a solid body into which you can introduce vibration, which is a plane, right, for all intents and purposes, and that would shake the plane apart.
Yeah, you might put something into the plane that like an energy that just fries electronics. They're not. There's no cables anymore. It's a wish list. You push the stick, and the computer decides whether that's an appropriate action or not.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a wish list steering, and they call it fly-by-wire, but really it's electronics. And you could interrupt that system and cause the plane. Remember, the DC-10 prevented the pilot from making a certain action given certain conditions, and when those conditions were met, the plane decided to do something else, and what was the reason for the DC-10 failing so often at a certain point in time? But because these are different, this is a DC-83, and the other ones were not Boeing, and sorry, the other ones were the 777s. You could do something. You could at the moment. There's no radar proof to show an inbound missile for a 17, and with all the radar data, if you notice, is still unavailable for 370. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm here.
Where's the radar data? Yeah. For this one, where's the radar data for any of them, for that matter? You publish that, and I'm going to be happy, man. But I wanted to say this, Becky, because you were talking about the weaponization from space and Tesla and everything. I just want to say, if you have, what's aspirin for that matter? Aspirin, what does it do? It thins your blood, right?
Yes.
It just happens to be, when taken by a person, it can relieve a headache or inflammation or something like that. Yep. But the difference between it being a medicine and being lethal as a weapon is only the dosage.
Correct.
What happens to rats? What is rat poison? No, by the way, it's aspirin. given it at great quantities. If a person
Yeah.
consumes enough aspirin, they'll bleed through their pores.
Yes.
Yeah, and warfarin for the elderly allows their blood to be thin enough to be able to pump through their hardened, caked arteries. For all those who are elderly, I apologise for the description, but that's a man-made chemical delivered as, in fact, in this case, what appears to be not a weapon, but for medical use. Now, this ties in with what you said. It's not the creator, it's the use.
Correct. But just one correction. Sorry, Dave. Aspirin is actually a birch bark extract.
Oh yes. But
We have no idea how or why it works. It just works.
It just works. Yeah.
It just works.
Thank you.
Yeah, but no, that's all good. That's all good. But you're right. You're correct. You're 100% correct. So to talk again then about the weaponizations. I mean, the thing is, these diseases exist in their own right in the world, and they kill people and they don't kill people. And if you're strong, you might resist it. The problem that we are creating here is we're making these bugs, these viruses, these bacteria more lethal than they are in nature. That's the weaponization of it. So weaponization means two things. Number one, you're making them more lethal. You increase the incubation period. That means you can infect more people before it actually kills you, and so forth. And secondly, we are making them deliverable in a more ready format. Now, the easiest way or the best way to deliver a disease is, of course, via the air. So have it airborne. That's the dream, right? that's the dream of the nightmare for us. It's the dream of the weapons creator. So
you could effectively spray it out of an aircraft.
Correct.
And as long as it was able to not be affected by UV light or whatever have you, temperature,
Totally.
it could be sprayed and then breathed in by a large population. Now, I remember the US were experimenting with the spraying of LSD, for instance,
Yes, sir.
during I think the Korean War. During World War II, they were certainly trying it, and to then just be able to walk in after these people became confused. I think that I wouldn't put it past any of the militarized countries to try this. Now, we've seen. I'm not going to say who did them, but for instance, you've got Syria, Iraq, were all claimed to have used chemical weapons. We know that there was treaties in place, but we'll talk about this during the show. I'm sure you've got it all in the notes.
We've just been corrected. I have been corrected. It's in fact not birch bark, but rather willow bark extract.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Wolfman J.
Yeah.
Look, you're right, Dave. Right, so think of contrails, chemtrails, right? As well. I mean, that's a great like if it's an aerosol, it's a great delivery system, right? And you're right that this has been. In fact, we've got some history for you guys coming up a bit further on. Maybe not today, but certainly in the show notes, we're going to talk about some of the experiments that have allegedly happened testing these weapons. So, but think about it. I mean, chemtrails. I mean, what's in it, and how does Morgelson's disease fit into it? There's a whole bunch of stuff that is really worrying. But the next story we wanted to bring you was about Ebola, and this is the beginning of the year, and the Ebola outbreak in Guinea, which was unprecedented. And these are the stats for Ebola. It is spread by close contact, so it is not really airborne. You wait till they weaponize Ebola, and it kills between 25 and 90%. 25 and 90%. So it's a dream for these weapons scientists. If you can weaponize Ebola, have it delivered in an aerosol, and I guess increase its incubation period so it can kill the 90% that you want killed. This is the perfect candidate, or one of the perfect candidate, right? And recently 78 people in Guinea were killed, right? And that's unprecedented. The Doctors Without Frontiers, without Borders, Doctors Without Borders, they said it's unprecedented to have that many people killed. Now, what's really strange, or what was strange, is that these cases were hundreds of kilometers apart. Okay, hundreds of kilometers apart. So that means there must have been several epicenters of this disease outbreak.
Yes, of course. Because
Now-
it's only close contact, and I've seen video footage of the ultimate pathogens, and one
Yep.
of those is, as you're treating the Ebola patient, you're becoming infected without you even knowing.
Yep. Now this is really so. Is this a test case, maybe? Or sorry, should I say, was this a test case? I would say, yeah, it's definitely possible. Okay, Liberia had some cases as well, 7 cases, right, recently, and it is what can I say? This disease is horrible. It's what it does. It breaks down the cell membranes, and you essentially bleed to death internally.
Yep.
Okay, it turns your body into mush.
Yeah,
It's
it's basically like a giant spider bite.
Yeah,
It liquefies
exactly.
your body. Yep.
Yes,
So
yes, absolutely. So
Th-
you have
this
you have Guinea, you've got Liberia, and you also have you've got Sierra Leone as well.
oh, really?
Yep, absolutely, and
Oh.
also Senegal, potentially.
The
Okay,
greatest
yeah.
worry about this, Meki, is because they're so geographically separated from each other, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean the outbreaks were that is correct. The epicenters of these outbreaks, there was no physical connection between some of these. Anyway, so that's is it a test case? Yes, maybe. Is the Chinese plague outbreak a test case? Well, I don't know. Maybe the NSA, which had by the way the mandate to do this, and this together with the CIA to create this depopulation agenda, may have let loose some rodents or some infected animals in the area. Because again, in China. It's quite common to catch local mammals and then eat them.
Yeah.
It's similar with the chicken or the bird flu, I should say, which had an outbreak there as well. I mean, these are all things that are happening today, and the problem, of course, is this: we are way too close as a global community not to be affected. If somebody contracts, let's call it maybe TB, let's call it TB, right? Tuberculosis.
Yeah.
And that's just the multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, and that person flies from I don't know, let's go to Beijing to Sydney, and then from Sydney to LA, and then from LA to New York, and from New York to Paris. You've got almost all the continents covered, and if you've got the disease vectors spreading, and the incubation period is sufficiently long so it doesn't kill you so quickly, then you can infect an incredible amount of people. You've seen those movies, right? I think they're called I think it was Outbreak and various other movies about diseases that spread quickly, right? And these scenarios are fairly real, and there's not much you can do about it, because even if you have a vaccine or some kind of protection, diseases, and this is the one problem for the elite, these diseases can mutate. So what you need to do if you are the elite and want to spread this, you need to be away from it all, right? And like Dave said, underground is good, and if you kill off the population in the city above you, even better. Outer space is good, okay? On sea is good too. Under the sea is good. So away from other people is essentially the message here. Away from other people. And you know what? If you look at the ancient stories about these gods and so forth, they were always on top of a mountain, very far away from the rest of humanity. Why? Because all of the plagues they could issue forth upon humanity would not touch them.
Exactly. Do you know what, Meki? During the plague in Europe, it's been said that like a white mist came through. People associated a white mist or seeing what they thought to be the Grim Reaper.
Really?
Yeah, completely. It was claimed over and over again in different areas. Now, not because they were looking for it in particular, because the people dying from it hadn't heard that news yet. But a lot of people were claiming to have seen lights in the sky, seen this white mist. They called it the death mist, and that was why the Simpsons played on it.
Wow!
Remember that it turned them inside out? Yeah. So
yeah. No, actually, that was a Halloween special. I remember.
It was, and they played on this, right? They thought that was hilarious, but the it was thought that possibly the lights in the sky were these viruses being brought by meteors.
That's panspermia, I guess, to some extent.
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah, that's right. So, what were the figures released overnight by Guinea's health ministry show that there had been 78 deaths from 122 cases of suspected Ebola since January, up from 70.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's crazy.
Yes, sir.
that we're getting this many people dying. What's that one, Meki, where you get purple blotches on you? I keep forgetting it.
Ooh.
It presents like the flu. You get purple blotches, and by the time you got the purple blotches, you're gone. Like there's no turning you back from that. I think it expands your brain, and you die.
It's not Marburg, is it?
No. Oh, I forget the name of it. But that's one that no one knows how that's transmitted, and suddenly people are just infected with it, and they don't know. No one knows. It's the same in America as the West Nile virus. They only suspect that it happens by birds, but they don't know, and yet they're that's bad. That affects both your brain and your muscle tissue.
No, I don't know, dude.
Yeah. So
Yeah. We'll find out.
I think Meki needs to turn off his video. His sound is going again. Poor thing. I should go around to his house and put some real internet in there. Poor thing. So, of all of those cases, there were 20...
Hello.
Yeah, there you go. You're back again. So, of these, there were 22 laboratory confirmed cases of Ebola, the ministry said, and Liberia has recorded a total of 7 suspected and confirmed cases, including 4 deaths, the World WHO said. So,
yep.
But this is what gets me, Meki, is Liberia's health minister Walter, Gweningale, on Monday warned people to stop having sex because the virus is spread via bodily fluids. Mm-hmm. There was, in addition to existing advice, to stop shaking hands and kissing.
Yeah. Best to be in a bubble, I tell you. Best to be in a bubble.
So I like the term of having the gods on the mountains. I like that. I'm certainly far enough away from people. Once a pandemic gets out there, guys, we'll probably offer some advice at the end of this series of shows. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is this, the next one that worries me specifically is the Papua New Guinea tuberculosis epidemic, potentially, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a news story from March 26, 2014, so it's only a couple of months ago. So apparently Papua New Guinea is on the brink of a tuberculosis epidemic. There are about 15,000 new cases of tuberculosis recorded annually in PNG, and the World Health Organization says that 25% of those prove fatal. So you get this, and you got a 1 in 4 chance of passing. And it's in fact it's linked to HIV. Most of the people that die of HIV actually die of TB. So if you've got HIV, tuberculosis is the #1 killer. That's why there were quite a few TB researchers on the plane that went down in Ukraine,
as well as the AIDS researchers. That's right.
Because AIDS is linked very close. Well, TB is linked very closely with AIDS, HIV. So there's a disconnect in most countries. Stuart Watson says of Pacific Beat between TB programs and HIV programs, and he believes they should be linked, which of course makes sense to me, right? A lot of people in PNG living with HIV are at a huge risk of contracting tuberculosis. Okay, it's a poverty disease. It's a disease of overcrowding. And of course, Papua New Guinea is not a rich country, right? It's quite a poor country. It has got very poor healthcare, and Australia is providing some of it, but I don't think doing enough.
And what else are we providing? We're sending people who want to come here to there.
Yeah, that's right. That's
think
exactly
about that,
right.
Meki.
No, I'm with you. Yeah. I hear you. Exactly. So the problem, he says, Watson, that is that the development of drug-resistant and multi-drug resistant cases in PNG are on the increase. Mm-hmm. So these multi-drug resistant TB strains are increasing massively, right? And it is treatable. TB is treatable, and that's the thing. The TB was around 100 years ago. In fact, quite a few famous writers died of it. I think Kafka eventually succumbed to TB. But the point is, it is a disease of poverty that can be easily treated, and we do not. And once you have it, it's pretty much over. Mm-hmm. So, and because it is so close to Australia, there's a real danger that once people get to Darwin or Broome or wherever, and then mix with the general population in Australia, this could lead to, again, the death rate is 25%, guys. 25%. What does it mean? Australia could lose in the vicinity of 8 or 9 million people. 8 or 9 million people could die of this in Australia. If you're in fact, so you got 15,000 new cases in Papua New Guinea every year. If you translate it to Australia, which has got better healthcare and so forth, sure enough, but we could get thousands of new cases here as well, and you wouldn't know because most doctors don't test for it in Australia.
You're right. I'll tell you something, Mickey. At my work over the last 6 weeks, you may not have noticed, but I'm feeling better now with a cough. But one person came in and coughed, and then everybody got it.
Right.
It was a viral, atomized virus that could live through atomizing itself, through the coughing process. And I think to myself just how lucky that I am not contracting something like TB, where you're in a hospital waiting room and someone's coughing without covering their mouth, and you're breathing in that recirculated air that goes through the air conditioning system, and it's a breeding ground. I'm not a germaphobe, but I'm acutely aware of how viruses can propagate. Mickey, one of the things that I looked at with this, and I know we're probably going to get down through this, but I wanted to bring it up because it's connected, and we've got the MH17, we've got tuberculosis, we've got the AIDS researchers, and it's current and it's in the news, and I wanted to sort of bring this up. Now, it does have its own controversy, no doubt, but it's the topic of AIDS itself. I've got 3 paragraphs that I've written down, and I think they're pertinent, and that should take us to the break, right? Scientists, these are extractions from another story, also discount any connection between the official outbreak of AIDS in 1981 and the experimental hepatitis B vaccine program between 1978 and 1981 at the New York Blood Center in Manhattan that used gays as guinea pigs shortly before the epidemic. Like I said, this is an extraction, not my exact thoughts, but this is part of a research program that I've been looking into. Downplayed is the laboratory creation of feline leukemia and cat AIDS by the transfer of HIV-like cat retroviruses in the mid-1970s. These experiments were conducted at Harvard by Myron, or Max, Essex. I've seen interviews with him during the week. Later, to become a famous himself AIDS researcher. All this man-made creation of AIDS in laboratory animals directly preceded the mysterious 1979 introduction of HIV in gay men, the most hated minority in America at the time. Nowadays, scientists hunt for ancestor viruses of HIV in chimps in the African wild, because that's where they were said to have come from, and ignore all of the immunosuppressive viruses that were created in virus laboratories shortly before AIDS. No consideration is given to any of these lab viruses as possible man-made ancestors of the many strains of HIV and HIV-2 that jumped species to produce AIDS in humans. I've watched an interview where the guy, this Max Essex, or Myron Essex, was directly questioned in front of 1,000 people, and he didn't say no. He said a bunch of different words, but none of them was no.
I have heard doublespeak before, and I've seen people being very uncomfortable when they had to actually say something meaningful. And if people tap dance around the no, then there is no. Exactly. And that is a real worry. Because people, I guess they will lie to you or lie by omission, but a direct question like that, which requires a yes or no, and you don't get one.
Yep. Bingo.
That's a clear indicator as to where you stand. Mm-hmm. The music should be with us any moment, guys. Please do remember, this is listener-supported radio. Please hit the donate button if you can. We appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm going to donate $10.
Woohoo!
listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. If you plan to call in and speak with one of our hosts, please turn down your radio and separate yourself from any background noise and wait for the area code to be called on before you speak. And don't forget, Revolution Radio freedomslips.com is listener supported. So stop by the homepage, freedomslips.com, visit the site support area to help support the host you're listening to's airtime. Thank you. Revolution Radio freedomslips.com, where the truth never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You're back with David Mackey, Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com. That's right, the number one, as Hawk said, listener-supported talk radio on the net. Since it is listener-funded radio and you like what you hear, please go to freedomslips.com and push the donate button on the site support page. It's on the left in the chat. Your donation is greatly appreciated and helps run this station. As Hawk says, yes, help support our Mecky and I's, not the other way, Mecky and I's airtime. I'd like to say hello to all the new listeners. Thank you so much. And hi, Lee. We actually caught up during the week. Another fan of the show. Thanks so much. You know what? We are glad you guys are following us. I know that we keep going up. Mickey, crazy on YouTube. The followers on YouTube going up. People are tweeting us now, which is really cool. And,
Nice.
you know, we've got really good connections with a whole bunch of people. And, you know what? Thank you to everyone. We're halfway through. I'll try that again. We are halfway through show number 126, and we're talking about diseases as weapons.
Yes, sir. Now, this is a fascinating topic, and again, Dave is right. Thank you so much for listening to what we have to say and the engagement. If you do see us in the streets in Australia, we are both near Sydney. Feel free to come and chat. That's cool. You know, if you see us, that's all good. You probably do know what we look like from the videos we post on YouTube. but you know, don't throw eggs on us. Okay, don't throw eggs. And stalking is not good either. But Dave and I, look, we're just folk like you, and with a specific interest. Some people are interested in sports, and fashion, and music, and wonderful things like that. That's cool. Dave and I, not really. Don't want to speak for you too much, Dave, but we're interested in these kinds of things and have been for decades. So we were fortunate enough to be offered. Well, Dave, in fact, was offered the opportunity to start this show. And invited me along, and it's been a hell of a ride. Tell you what, that's been something.
I pulled it in. I pulled it in the first second I got authorization to run this show. So
he sure did, and I thank him greatly for this, because we used to be the soap boxers, right? Dave and I, the entertainment guys. But I'm digressing from what we're doing today. So weapons as disease. Now, this is not a new thought, Dave. This has been around for a long time. But before we go into the history of this, and I believe we have some more information on maybe some of the plague information that you wanted to share with us as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that this is a little known fact from World War II. And it's actually Japan's private war against China. Meki and I know about this one, but for those of you who don't, it's really interesting that the Imperial Japanese Army and their lethal human experimentation between 1937 and it miraculously ceased at 1945.
What a shock!
Yeah, due to nuclear intervention. But I have to say that Japan were trialing weapons, and this is extraordinary, right? They were trialing weapons platforms for deployment of plague across the channel into China. They were doing this in two separate locations, but the main place was in Nagasaki, where their chemicals lab was. But over on the mainland, because they had base. They had I'll tell you about this, right? So they successfully tested the plague in a laboratory conditions against Chinese prisoners. And if you might not know how many there were, but they were known as Unit 731 or Nana-san Ichi Butai. It was a covert operation that was officially named, get the name, Meki, Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. That's what they were known as, and they were actually making the plague. Up to 12,000 men, women, and children died during the human experimentation conducted by Unit 731 at the camp based in Pinfang alone, just in that one base.
Yeah, that reminds me of I can't remember the name of the book and the movie now, but essentially it wasn't 1984, but there's these people that memorized books, and the firefighters, the firemen came, and the firemen in the book were the ones that burned the books, right? So it's once again, it's everything is in the name, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like the Fair Pay Commission, you're not going to get anything fair out of them. Let's put it that way. All right, I'm going to get hunted now for sure. I had to say that the 12,000 does not include victims from other medical experimentation sites. So it's only that one site. Almost 70% of them that died in that one camp, Pinfang, were Chinese, including both civilian and military. So it's whoever they captured, it didn't matter. Close to 30%, the remaining almost 30% of them, were Russian.
Yeah.
Some others were Southeast Asians and Pacific Islanders. At the time, the colonies of the Empire of Japan were, spreading out into Pacific. So they were grabbing anyone, taking them back there and giving them a plague to experiment with. But the biggest experimentation that they had an issue with was how can they use the plague in a military shell? How can they put it in a shell and fire it and have it go somewhere and still be alive as a issue? So as a deployment platform. So they received generous support. This is Unit 731 from the Japanese government up to the end of the war in 1945. Japan packed fleas into sand-filled shells, which were fired or could be dropped by planes. So the sand prevented the fleas from being crushed by the explosion at the other end, and then they could just jump out and infect people. Quite an interesting deployment method. But this is the big stat, right? Approximately 30 kilos of the plague bacteria could be produced in this one place in several days. 30 kilos of it, especially in the area of biological weapons. Unit 731 could be considered to be the largest such laboratory ever in the world at the time, of course.
That's a lot of fleas. That's a lot of fleas, Dave.
That is a lot of fleas. 30 kilos. Yeah?
Yeah.
Not only that it was the state-of-the-art facility, it significantly extended the state-of-the-art. Partially because the Japanese had no reluctance at all to experiment with live patients, including doing autopsies while the victims were still alive. It almost sounds, and I hate to say the words, but that same kind of mentality that was around at the time. The Germans were doing the same thing. Yeah? From what I understand. Yep. So, in 1940, October 4th, Japan dropped plague-infected fleas, causing bubonic plague and other plagues over Quzhou, Quzhou. Look for that. Google that one. A small town in western China. The first victims died within a few days, and more than 2,000 died within 1 year of this plague being flown over and dropped. In addition, in September 41, so that's the next year, a railway worker brought the plague from that town to his own city, about 90 miles away. Within a year, more than 1,000 extra people in his town died. This is big. That was a whole year later, and it spread to his town and killed 1,000 people in his town.
That's the thing with disease. It might lie dormant for a while, but once you've introduced it into population, even though, especially if some people are immune to it naturally, they could be carriers. And this is really the key thing here, guys, right? You could be a carrier and never get sick, right? And I believe that there are quite a few of those people out there right now, biological time bombs, if you will, that are carrying diseases, okay, that have been experimented upon, that are just waiting to infect everybody else. So it's actually a crime to do that. If you know you're sick with something and you infect someone deliberately, that's murder.
Yeah, completely. So one of the things that came about from me doing this research into Japan versus China war that no one ever knows about is how close they got to wiping out China.
Yeah.
If they didn't put all that effort into the Pacific and they just flew planes. Think about 7 days is 30 kilos. They could have had all of their bombers and all of their even fighter planes just dropping stuff out over China, and it would have wiped China out. There'd be no more China. Think how close they got to this, and
Yeah, but the thing is this, Dave. I mean, these diseases don't know that there's a border, so they would just keep on going. It's Chinese border. Oh yeah, better stop here now. And that's really the problem that people face. You're right, though. You're right. I
Yeah,
mean, you drop it in the right populations within China. China will be the first one to be wiped out. Then it might peter out at the edges. But once, as I said, once you introduce something into population, it's there to stay.
Well, yeah. Think about the AIDS virus. Think about TB. If you want to be a citizen in Australia and you come from the Pacific Islands, one of the tick boxes is, do you have TB?
Yep.
It's actually one of the tick boxes.
I wonder what happens if you tick yes.
Well, do you know what's also very unusual about it is TB in the Pacific Islanders' view is actually a terrible thing to admit to, because it puts a negative. I don't know what the right word. I've lost for a word, but the family is hurt.
It's a shameful thing.
It brings your family shame. Thank you.
Right.
That you're admitting this openly, that you've done it. Not that you've actually had it, because that's something else, but because they have their families are very close knit. They live in small communities, and they have a breeding program that's very careful that you're not, cousins. It's harmful to your family, and people coming to Australia who thought it was shameful to tick it and didn't want to admit it, and then were later on diagnosed. That's actually even worse, because as Meki contested, Meki, when you went to America and you came back and you're at a conference and everyone was sick. Yep. Yeah, and you brought that back with you.
Correct. We brought the flu back to all corners of the world. So my colleagues in the UK, in the US, sorry, not in the US so much, but in the UK, in Asia, and in Australia, we were all quite sick, to be honest with you. And it just shows you, just if you've got one epi point, it happened to be Dallas in this particular case, you can fly anywhere in the world, you take the disease with you. It's horrible, and that's why people are a bit paranoid about it. I get that, right? But having said that, once again, the global elite, actually, let's not call them that. That's too ominous.
Yeah.
Those that know, those that control us, have this in mind. And the reason Kissinger again rose to prominence is because he delivered a paper around population control very early on in his career. But Dave gave us a good insight into World War II here and what the Japanese were doing, but most people don't, in fact, know. I want to give you a bit more of a historical overview as to the development of, I guess, diseases as weapons. Not sophisticated, but more sophisticated than you might imagine. So the earliest documented incident of the intention to use biological weapons is recorded in Hittite texts around 1500 BC. There are probably earlier cases, but this is the first recorded. And in this case, it was tularemia, which is an infectious disease, quite strong. And still, there are still outbreaks. The latest outbreak, I think, was in October of 2000 in Martha's Vineyard, and that resulted in one fatality. But essentially, tularemia victims were driven into enemy lands. Right, so you have a horde of sick people driven before horses, which then caused an epidemic, right? And now, although the Assyrians knew of ergot, a parasitic fungus of rye which produces ergotism, when ingested, there's no evidence that they poisoned enemy wells with the fungus, as has been claimed. So the Assyrians were accused of using ergot fungus to poison the enemy's wells.
I forget there was also someone who gave out blankets.
Yes,
do you remember that?
We'll get to that.
Yeah, cool.
Oh yeah, yes, sir. That's a shocker. In fact, what we did to the Aborigines of every continent is anyway, it's a whole different thing. Sorry, during the 4th century BC, Scythian archers tipped their arrow tips with snake venom, human blood, and animal feces to make sure that the wounds of the enemies would become infected. Right now, this is right exactly now. The Roman commander Manius Aquilius poisoned the wells of besieged enemy cities in about 130 BC. In about 190 AD, so in this side of Jesus, if you will, the Parthian city of Hatra, which is near Mosul in Iraq, repulsed the Roman army led by Septimius Severus by hurling clay pots filled with live scorpions in them.
Oh,
Well, this is not disease as such, but it goes into I guess the same. Well, the Japanese are doing it with fleas. They put them in clay pots,
exactly,
right? So
exactly. Yep.
now there are numerous other instances of plant toxins, venoms, and other poisonous substances used as biological weapons in antiquity. When we go to the Middle Ages, though,
That's
the
my
Mongol
favorite.
Empire. Yeah, right. I hear you. The Mongol Empire established commercial and political connections between the eastern and western areas of the world through the most mobile army ever seen. We all remember the Golden Horde, right? We all remember the Mongol forces sweeping into Europe. Well, we might not remember it. We might remember it from our histories, nonetheless. Now, the armies that were composed mostly of rapidly moving travelers, on horseback, and between East Asia and Europe. And in East Asia, the bubonic plague actually originated. And they managed to keep the chain of infection without a break until they reached and infected peoples and rodents who had never encountered it. So people brought the disease with them from East Asia into Europe. The Black Death killed roughly a third, I think it's higher, in fact I've heard 60 and 75% of
me
the
too.
population of Europe in the next decades. And it changed, arguably the course of Asian European history as well as the face of Europe. Now imagine if roughly half the population dies away. Okay? Then what would happen? I mean, everything would collapse and you would have a very different society emerging from that, I would say.
Completely.
Now, during the Middle Ages, though, interestingly enough, victims of the bubonic plague were used for biological attacks, often by flinging them, across walls using catapults. So you get an infected corpse, living or dead, and load it up into your catapult and fling it across the wall of whatever castle or city you're besieging. For example, go on.
They also did with the cows.
Yep.
Anything
Pigs.
at all,
Yep.
flick it inside the castle. I mean, the castle's a fort, an open-walled, fort, and anything that comes within those walls, that's going to do you some harm.
Yes, absolutely.
They would wrap them in blankets too. I love it. Love the blanket thing.
Oh, look. In fact, it happened at the siege of Thun-le-Évêque in 1340 during the 100 Years' War. And like you said, Dave, the attackers catapulted the decomposing animals into the besieged area. In 1422, during the siege of Karlstein Castle in Bohemia, Hussite attackers used catapults to throw dead, but not plague-infected bodies, and 2,000 carriage loads of dung over the walls. That's a lot of dung. The last known incident of using plague corpses for biological warfare occurred in 1710 when Russian forces attacked by the Swedes and were flinging plague-infected corpses over the city walls of Reval. However, during the siege of Lacal in Tunisia, in 1785, Tunisian forces flung diseased clothing into the city. So not bodies or corpses, but rather clothes. Interestingly enough, as well, English longbowmen, usually similar to the Scythian warriors, usually did not draw their arrows from a quiver, but rather they stuck the arrows into the ground in front of them, and this allowed them to knock them faster, but also they were hoping that the dirt and soil would infect the wounds of their intended victims.
You only have to remember that you could die cutting yourself shaving.
Yes, sir.
From an infection. So it didn't take much to infect anyone then. We didn't have antibiotics.
Look, penicillin, right? Antibiotics, which sort of came afterwards, have only been around for like 100 years.
Yeah.
During the Civil War, 1864, in like the 19th century, only 150 years ago, the most common cause of death was wound fever, which means any wound that you get when you were shot or stabbed or whatever got infected, and you would die of the infection. You wouldn't die of being shot or being hacked to pieces or blown up. No, you would die because the wound that you had could not be treated properly, and an infection would take you. The leading cause of death for mothers or expecting mothers was wound fever as well and childbed, because obviously it's quite a horrendous process for the body, and if you don't have penicillin or antibiotics to kill off the bacteria that cause infection, you will die. And again, women and children would fall sick with the fever that they contracted as part of the wounds that weren't treated. So it was a very common cause of death. And you're right, Dave, you could shave yourself and cut yourself and die from that. We don't realize this today. In fact, people who had their legs amputated all the time because there was nothing to stop the rot.
That's right.
So once the rot sets in and you get your blood infected, you can die from what's the name for it? Sepsis.
Yep.
Is it sepsis?
Septicemia.
Septicemia, that's it. So your blood, in fact, would become infected, and you have to chop off the infected body parts, because it's killing you. And it was very common to see amputees, quite a bit. In fact, it happened to my grandfather. He lost his arm that way in World War II. So you can see that it was a very different world. However, now we come to the 18th century, and I think your favorite part of biological warfare, Dave. Well, favorite, I wouldn't say favorite, but it's certainly the most horrendous because it was so callously inflicted upon the natives.
Yes, that's true. So, do you want me to take this one?
Please.
Yeah, cool. The Native American population was devastated after contact with the Old World due to the introduction of several fatal infectious diseases, notably smallpox. And that's what Meki was talking about. So these diseases can be traced to Eurasia, where the people had long lived with them and developed some immunological ability to survive their presence. So they were immune to it. Without similarly long ancestral exposure, indigenous Americans, and also the Aztecs for that matter,
and Aborigines, yep.
Yes, and everyone native who was isolated for some time since the introduction of the pathogen, were extremely vulnerable. There were 2 documented instances of biological warfare by the British against North American Indians during the Pontiac's rebellion. That was 1763 to 66. In the first, during a parley at Fort Pitt on June 24th, 1763, Captain Simeon, okay, gave representatives of the besieging Delawares 2 blankets and a handkerchief. But these weren't that kind of gift, were they, Meki? These
No, they weren't.
They weren't. They'd been exposed to smallpox, hoping to spread the disease to the natives in order to end the siege. Well, that was successful. William Trent, the militia commander, left records that clearly indicated the purpose of giving the blankets was to convey the smallpox to the Indians. I mean, that's chemical warfare. That's using a pathogen for, and I think I always believe these were civilized times with gentlemen but no.
Not so.
Not so much. I don't think we've got to that period in time yet, have we? British Commander Lord Geoffrey Amherst and Swiss British officer Colonel Henry Bouquet discussed the topic separately in a course of the same conflict. There exists correspondence referencing the idea of giving smallpox-infected blankets to enemy Indians. It cited 4 letters from blah, 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 blah. Excerpts from that proved it. Yeah, this is one of them. P.S. You will do well to try to inoculate the Indians by means of blankets. Inoculate. And as today, inoculation is an anti, rather than this is using as a positive, as well as to try every other method that you can serve to
extirpate.
That's a new word for me. This execrable race. I'd probably get rid of them, I suspect that means.
Correct.
I should be very glad your scheme for hunting them down by dogs could take effect. My goodness, Meki.
They were not seen as people.
No. Remember, these were sparsely inhabited lands that was in the news this week. Bouquet replied on a little later with his letter, and he said, "I received yesterday Your Excellency's letters of 16th with their enclosures. The signal for Indian messages and all your directions will be observed." So he's saying, yes, I'm going to go and do it.
Yes.
I think it's terrible. It's
shocking.
Yeah, it is.
So how many died, do we
Well-
estimate?
Well, it's estimated that between 400 and 500,000, between 400,000 and 500,000 Native Americans died during and after the war from smallpox.
That's incredible if you think about it. Now, on total population terms, because, again, the population of the
Per
of
capita
North America
at the
was
time, yeah.
was counted in the millions, and they weren't really that closely together. I mean, these are not population centers as we understand them today. These are people that are quite far apart from each other. But to kill that many nonetheless is quite a feat.
Remember that
and-
the blankets, it's the blankets that were affected by the fleas, yeah, and so
Yes, sir.
you're passing that on, and you're introducing this into a species. It's people who haven't got any immunity to it. That's just
Yeah.
shocking.
It is, and I mean, the thing is that the wipeout was probably between 25 and 30% of the population at that time. The rest then was decimated by war, by displacement, by starvation, and then eventually, by locking them up into reservations. But it was genocide. I'm afraid that nobody on this planet has the patent on genocide. I think it's part of the human condition, my friend.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Hey, Mackie, what happened in New South Wales? What happened in the state we live in?
Well, this is interesting, right? So now the Australian Aborigines, especially the Kooris, have always maintained that the British deliberately used smallpox in 1789, right, to wipe out the Aboriginal population. But that particular possibility was not raised until the 1980s by Western or Australian historians, if you will, when Dr. Noel Butlin suggested there are some possibilities that disease could have been used deliberately as an exterminating agent. In 1997, David Day claimed that there remains considerable circumstantial evidence to suggest that officers other than Philip, or perhaps convicts or soldiers, deliberately spread smallpox among Aborigines, and in 2000, Dr. John Lambert argued that strong circumstantial evidence suggests the smallpox epidemic which ravaged Aborigines in 1789 may have resulted from deliberate infection. Now, let's back up here for a second. What Dave just shared with us in North America, that was not perpetrated by Americans.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand it was the British.
Exactly.
It was the British that were doing that in North America in the 1760s. Now, if it worked in the 1760s in North America and killed 400,000 or 500,000 Native Americans, tell me, Dave, why would you not do the same in the 1780s and 1790s, some 30 years later in Australia?
I think they emailed the same letter to everybody.
Yeah, I'm sure the memo went out, right?
It
They must
did.
have all seen the memo.
Yeah.
Okay, now, in 2002, Judy Campbell argued it is highly improbable that the First Fleet was the source of the epidemic, as smallpox had not occurred in any members of the First Fleet. The only possible source of infection from the fleet being exposure to various matter imported for the purpose of inoculation against smallpox. But I would say here that we should not forget that people were carrying the virus. And what I'm saying to you here is that just because you're not sick doesn't mean you don't carry the little buggers with you.
That's right.
You do.
You can be
The
a
bacteria-
carrier. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that is what happened here. Okay, I think what happened here is well, fair enough. Nobody got sick. Fair enough. I get that, but I think a lot of people were carrying the pathogen with them. And then when it did happen, when people did get sick, I think that's when we were exposing the Aborigines to that. So I have to say, I don't think it is extremely unlikely that it didn't happen, because, like I said, if it worked in the 1760s, it'll work again in the 1780s.
Do you know what, Mackie? This is I've got a slide up at the moment, and this it's sort of pertinent right now, right? It says casualties for nuclear release. So if you had a dirty bomb, right, it's going to go downrange and kill a certain amount of people. Yeah, but this is the it's the effect of nuclear versus biological weapon release. So this is just an airborne release, and the airborne release actually kills more people of a pathogen than a nuclear event. And I think that says something. It's quite an effective method, and used the way they used them, whether intentional or not, because they don't want to really blame Philip. He's got a, he's got a good name. That I can see, I can hear what he's saying. He doesn't want to bring the guy down, saying you intentionally did it, passing it off to the people under him. But it still reeks. It does reek, and it's the same time period.
Yep. I hear you. Look, this is the truth. And again, you have to understand that for the longest time, Aborigines were not considered people in Australia. In fact, they only became people in the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, by law. By law. And when I mean people, I mean citizens and human beings. So that's actually a horrendous way to treat your fellow human beings, but nonetheless, there it is. So, which brings us to World War One, and in World War One, I guess it was the first mass-produced weaponization of these agents. I mean, the Germans, had a few, attempts at, for example, using anthrax. Okay, little ampules. Were used to I guess, spread amongst enemy troops. They were using mustard gas for the first time as well in large quantities, which is arguably a chemical rather than a biological weapon, but nonetheless. Anthrax was also supplied to the German military attaché in Bucharest. So, you would spread the disease behind enemy lines, if you will.
Yes.
And it was employed against livestock, which was destined for the Allied service against the Germans. And there was a secret lab that was established by German intelligence officers and U.S. citizen Dr. Anton Casimir Dilger in the basement of his sister's home in Chevy Chase, Maryland, that produced these agents or these viruses, which were used to infect livestock in ports and inland collection points, including at least Newport News, Norfolk, Baltimore, and New York, and probably St. Louis and Covington, Kentucky as well. So this is World War One. This is secret agents using these things behind, as I said, enemy lines in the countries that were fighting against them. Same thing happened in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and where they destroyed a wheat harvest with a destructive fungus. Okay, so this wasn't on the front lines, but rather, by agent provocateurs at the homeland. The Geneva Protocol, though, of 1925, which was signed by 108 nations, prohibited the use of chemical and biological weapons. However, it said nothing about experimentation, production, storage, or transfer.
That's right.
Okay. Later treaties did cover those aspects, however. But 20th century advances in microbiology enabled the first pure culture biological agents to be developed by World War II. Now, unfortunately, with the Geneva Protocol of 25, no method for verification or compliance was ever addressed. So, but we are entering now into the era of World War II and I guess the interwar period, where there was little research done in the UK or US at first. It was mostly conventional weapons everybody worried about. However, as tensions increased, Sir Frederick Banting began lobbying the British government to establish a research program into the research and development of biological weapons to effectively deter the Germans from launching a biological attack. So it was a mutually assured destruction, right? MAD, again, but not with nuclear weapons, with biological weapons. And he proposed a number of innovative schemes for the dissemination of pathogens, including aerial spray attacks and germs distributed through the mail system. Now, again, I'm thinking here chemtrails, and I'm thinking the anthrax attack in Washington.
Posting white powder, that's right.
Right, not too long ago, right? Okay, now, with the onset of hostilities though for World War II, the Ministry of Supply finally established a biological weapons program at Porton Down, headed by microbiologist Paul Fields. The research was championed by Winston Churchill, no less, and soon our old friends tularemia, anthrax, brucellosis, and botulism toxins had been effectively weaponized. This is now over 60 years ago, guys. 60. Now, when the US entered the war, mounting British pressure for the creation of a similar research program for an allied pooling of resources led to the creation of a large industrial complex at Fort Detrick in Maryland in 1942 under the direction of George W. Merck. Merck. Yeah, Merck Industries, a big pharma concern today.
Remember that name, guys.
Good. The biological and chemical weapons developed during that period were tested at the Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah, and soon there were facilities for the mass production of anthrax spores, brucellosis, and botulism toxin. Although the war was over before these weapons could be of much operational use. Were they shut down? Not likely!
No, not at all.
However, and this is in fact what Dave has shared with us already, the most notorious program of the period was run by the secret Imperial Japanese Army Unit 731. But Dave has given us some really good insight into this already. However, when the war ended, the US Army quietly enlisted certain members of Noborito, which is Unit 731, in its efforts against the communist camp in the early years of the Cold War.
Wow.
Hello?
Yeah. I didn't know
Operation
that, Nicky.
Yeah, I know. Operation Paperclip, except in Japan.
That's right.
The head of Unit 731, Shiro Ishii, which you mentioned, was granted immunity from war crimes prosecution in exchange for providing information to the United States on the unit's activities. Bow! Yeah, there you go. How about them apples?
Yeah.
Allegations were made that a chemical section of a U.S. clandestine unit hidden within Yokosuka Naval Base was operational during the Korean War, and then worked on unspecified projects inside the United States from 1955 to 1959 before returning to Japan to enter the private sector. Yay! Yay! Now, some of the unit
Very contracted back to the military again.
Right?
Yeah.
This is history. We're living it. Some of the Unit 731 personnel were imprisoned by the Soviets, and this is a speculation now, and may have been a potential source of information on Japanese weaponization of biological weapons. So while everybody is focused on Germany and the Nazi scientists and Operation Paperclip, very few people know that the exact same thing happened in Japan. Okay, the Japanese, they were, I mean, you have to realize, Dave already shared it, but 400,000 Chinese died as a direct result of these field tests. Field tests! Field tests. Yeah? Field tests. 400,000. Yeah. Now the Americans, they must have been, foaming at the mouth to get information like this. I mean, they had been doing their own programs, but obviously none of this was operational for any use in World War II. The Japanese, and certainly the Germans as well, but the Japanese here very successfully field testing 400,000 Chinese, and I guess speeding up the U.S. development by decades, I would imagine.
Yeah.
This is reality, guys. Okay, George W. Merck, look him up, see what he does today. Well, he's not around anymore, but he certainly owns a huge Merck, Merck pharmacies. Well, look it up. Anyway, after the war, the Cold War started, and that's when a massive amount of money was pumped into the weaponization of these biological agents. So in Britain, for example, in the 1950s, we have the plague, brucellosis, tularemia, and later equine encephalomyelitis
mad cow disease.
Yes, and vaccinia viruses. Okay, trial tests at sea were carried out, including Operation Cauldron off Stornoway in 1952. The program allegedly was cancelled in 1956 when the British government unilaterally announced the renounced the use of biological and chemical weapons. Yeah, sure. The United States initiated its weaponization effort with disease
The
vectors
next
in
year.
That's right, in 1953. So all the scientists that may have lost their job in the UK moved to the US.
Yep.
And they were focused on plague fleas. Hey, Dave, plague fleas.
I
That's
know.
Japanese, right?
Yeah, completely.
EE mosquitoes and yellow fever mosquitoes. Okay, once again, I guess in the insect delivery that the Japanese favorite. What a shock. However, US medical scientists in occupied Japan undertook extensive research on insect vectors with the assistance of former Unit 731 staff as early as 1946. Okay, so several years before then. The United States Army Chemical Corps then initiated a crash program to weaponize anthrax in E61 half-pound hourglass bomblets, so little, glass containers. Though the program was successful in meeting its development goals, the lack of validation on the infectivity of anthrax stalled standardization. The United States Air Force was also unsatisfied with the operational qualities of the M114 US bursting bomblet and labeled it an interim item until the Chemical Corps could deliver a superior weapon. 1950s, guys, 1950s. Around 1950, the Chemical Corps also initiated a program to weaponize tularemia. Shortly after the E61N failed to make standardization, tularemia was standardized in the 3.5-inch M143 bursting spherical bomblets. This was intended for delivery by the MGM-29 Sergeant missile warhead and could produce 50% infection over a 7-square-mile area.
Wow.
Woomba! Although tularemia is treatable by antibiotics, treatment does not shorten the course of the disease. US conscientious objectors were used as consenting test subjects for tularemia in a program known as Operation Whitecoat. Let me say this again. US conscientious objectors, these are the guys that don't want to fight, were used as consenting test subjects for tularemia in a program known as Operation Whitecoat.
Wow.
What a shock!
You don't want to go to war? Cool.
Yeah, come here,
Have
test
some
some
of this.
disease. Have some disease for me.
What's
There
that?
were also
No, hang
many-
on. What's that up there on the ceiling? Hey, why did you just stick me with
Ouch.
something?
Oh, that hurt.
No.
It's a shocker, right? Now, there were also many unpublicized tests carried out in public places with bioagent stimulants during the Cold War. This information does not come from conspiracy sites. You know where it comes from? Wikipedia. It's all
in fact,
referenced.
and also the news. I remember that. I
Yes.
think it was in Detroit. They had
Yes.
gas outlets on the top, gas cylinders letting out gas on the rooftops, and
Yes.
they also tested African Americans who were
Yes.
jailed. So inmates. It's awful, just awful.
Yeah. Now, the worrying thing for me here is that in addition to using these bursting bomblets, the Chemical Corps started investigating aerosol generating bomblets in the 1950s. 60 years ago, 1950s.
Yeah.
1950s, okay? Now, there were a lot of developments here, super dry agents. There was a dry type biologicals that resemble talcum powder, yeah,
Yep.
and could be disseminated on aerosols using gas expulsion devices instead of a burster or complex sprayer. So we're talking like aerosol cans or something. The Chemical Corps developed Flettner rotor bomblets, and later triangular bomblets for wider coverage due to improved glide angles over Magnus Lift spherical bomblets. And the weapons of this type were in advanced development by the time the program ended. Yeah, I'm sure that's true, right? Woohoo!
Yeah,
That
that's
never
right.
happened.
No.
Okay, now from January 1962, the Rocky Mountain Arsenal grew purified and biodemilitarized plant pathogen wheat stem rust, which is Agent TX, Puccinia graminis, for the Air Force biological anti-crop program. And then later on, I think Agent Orange was what. You know why Agent Orange was used to deforest, essentially, to
That's right.
defoliate jungle so they could see the enemy.
Mhm.
Now, however, there's no evidence that biological weapons were used by the United States, China, and North Korea. Sorry, by the United States. China and North Korea do accuse the US, though, of large-scale field testing of biological weapons against them during the Korean War in the 50s. I would be astonished if they didn't. Okay?
Agreed.
Now, there were ceramic containers, and Cuba was also accusing the United States of spreading human and animal disease on their island nation. Again, I would not really put it past them. During the 1948 Israel War of Independence, 1948, I love that, Israel War of Independence, International Red Cross reports raised suspicion that the Israeli Haganah militia had released Salmonella typhi bacteria into the water supply of the city of Acre, causing an outbreak of typhoid among the inhabitants. Okay, so the Israelis at that time, well, they weren't Israelis, they were simply, I guess, a Jewish militia at that point.
Because in 1948, they were donated the land by the occupying British Empire.
Well, that's putting a very positive spin on it. What happened was...
The word donated.
Yeah, the British withdrew because they could no longer fight the Arab or Jewish militias, and they said, "Oh, this is all too hard.
Yeah,
We're
and so they
giving
got
up.
out. Yeah.
See ya." Now, biological and toxin weapons conventions. There were a few. I'll mention a few of you. There was in '69. There was the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention in 1972.
Yep.
Nixon also signed an executive order in November '69, which stopped production of biological weapons in the States. Sure, it did. And allowed only scientific research of lethal biological agents and defensive measures such as immunization and biosafety. So you were not allowed to produce them, but you could continue to research them. That's wonderful. The biological munition stockpiles were destroyed, and approximately 2,200 researchers became redundant. Sure,
Don't believe it.
Special munitions for the United States Special Forces and the CIA and the Big Five weapons for the military were destroyed in accordance with Nixon's executive order to end the offensive program. The CIA maintained its collection of biologicals well into 1975, when it became the subject of the Senate Church Committee. Now, what are the Big Five? This is interesting.
Yeah, because you just mentioned that.
Correct, sirs. Now, the Big Five was a series of biological weapons developed by the United States Army Chemical Corps Special Operations Division, the SOD, at Fort Detrick Biological Warfare Lab for use by special forces. These weapons were developed in the 50s and 60s and allegedly eventually destroyed when the States unilaterally ended its offensive biological warfare program. Sure it did. Now, these weapons were the M1 BioDart.
Can I say M1? This is a 7.62 millimeter rifle cartridge, with a sabot surrounding a fletchet with exterior grooves filled with the with either basically botulism or saxitoxin, which is TZ. We all know about that, or possibly a combination of the two. There were 4,450 filled and 5,315 unfilled M1s in the arsenal at the time of the destruction.
Yes, sir.
This is a rifle cartridge. Deployment method. What? Go ahead, next, Mekhi.
It was the M2 Sepro bullet, right? And this was also a 7.62 millimeter rifle cartridge with a hollow metal bullet containing dry type botulism or simulant. The bullet would release a puff of aerosol on impact.
Oh.
Yes, anthrax was another possible fill, and there were 71,000 filled and 14,000 unfilled when they were destroyed. Yeah, sure they were.
So even if you miss your target, you're gonna get something. And you could just have snipers with these too, by the way.
Yep.
Think about how that would work. The M4 disseminator, a small gas expulsion device for disseminating a dry type agent, such as the tularemia, or SR. There were 21,150 filled and another 34,500 unfilled M4s in the arsenal at the time of its destruction.
Incredible. There was also the M5 Depositor. That was a metal can that would expel a quantity of dry type from the side of a road, like an IDE, I guess, to work as an anti-convoy device from secondary aerosols. Though intended for anthrax, these were only filled with simulants, they say. Well, anyway, there were 90 filled and 2,600 unfilled when they were destroyed.
Wow. The M32 disperser, using a pressurized gas bottle, regulator, heater, and timer, the M32 was a man-pack weapon for a pre-emplacement upwind of a target. The agent reservoir was an interchangeable compartment that held either 7 litres of wet type or 2.7 kilograms of dry type agent. It was intended for use with SR or other simulants. There were 168 filled and 348 unfilled M32s. Meki, when I hear dry type, I think about how fire extinguishers can push out a dry type dust.
Yep.
And how that propellant is exactly the same kind of thing that they're looking at right here.
Same, exactly, sir. So and again, what worries me are the chemtrails again, right? Because if you do it from a height, and you got spores, for example, or or whatever the biological agent is that you're dispersing, it's a powerful thing to do. It truly is a powerful. So it's and we brought you this today, guys, because it is one of the things that I believe is going to actually happen. Okay, this will happen because it's cheap. It will happen because it is already available. It has been available in its weaponized form for 60 years. Imagine how much research could have been done in 60 years on this. And trust me, people have been researching this. Okay, I mean, there's so much money going into black budgets and black projects. Good luck trying to find where they all are. But the point is this: these weapons exist, and they will be released at the appropriate time to reduce the population. And so far, we've only ever seen, I guess, test or field testing, right? I mean, this is still all being field tested. And maybe they haven't quite gotten to the point of releasing it because, it would... Well, there's no returning from that. It's the point of no return. And maybe there's enough humanity left in those people to make them think twice. That's my hope anyway.
Wow. Do you know what? I think it just came around all too quick once again, Meki. That's a great show, 126. Get into our archives. Enjoy all of the other stuff that we talk about, and message us during the week, and give us some ideas. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Next week.
Take care, guys.